Okay, y'all, I am so excited for today's podcast. I have been following Ashton for so many years now, probably for about 2 or 3 years when I first learned about the Enneagram. And she's kind of been my go-to resource, whether she knows it or not. I have sent so many people in my world that don't know much about the Enneagram, and I'm definitely not an expert. But after today's episode, I hope we're all much more educated on the Enneagram, how it actually helps us not only in relationships, but in business and just for self-development and all the things. So Ashton, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me and for the kind words. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, girl. Well, I'm super excited, and this podcast is really about helping people decide it's their turn. And people like one of the things that how this whole podcast got started is just truly due to the fact that like I was sick and tired of my own sick and tiredness back like 15 years ago, and I truly made a decision that I was going to figure out how to be happy. I was going to figure out how to be successful, and I really made a true decision. And I think that so many people kind of waver on making a true decision. And when I was looking at your intake form and I thought that this would be a great place to start, back in 2019, you said one of the biggest decisions that you ever made was leaving your corporate job. So I'd love for you to kind of take us back to where you were before you became like the internet sensation and the go-to Enneagram expert.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. I think like probably a lot of the listeners and people who are in your community of just exactly what you said. It's like I'm going to carve out a place in the world for me to do what I feel passionate about and that brings me joy and allows me to have other opportunities. So it was back on January 2019 where I first started my account just as like a creative outlet. Something I'm a psychologist by trade, so I had discovered the Enneagram in my master's program and was just starting to like share it with people and share with people what I was learning. And so it kind of took off from there where people started asking me for help in figuring out not just like what their type is, but how to utilize it with their relationships and with their coworkers and their colleagues and things like that. And so from there, I was like, you know what? This is a great opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and get certified in the Enneagram, learn as much as I can. And then that allowed me to be able to quit my full-time job about a year later. It was right before COVID. It was a crazy time to take that risk. It was a crazy time to take that risk, but it has paid off in so many amazing ways in being able to have kind of the life that I have wanted to have and to be able to share my passions with the world.
I love it. So when you were a psychologist, obviously you had like, did you have your own practice? Did you work for someone else? Were you in a position that you were just kind of like, this is kind of not what I thought it was? Or were you like totally happy and this was just another area?
So I was doing a lot of really difficult work. I was working in the field of domestic violence and sexual assault prevention, working my way up from like doing work with survivors and then helping to train community groups and organizations on how they can prevent these things from happening. So a high burnout rate, right? When you're working in such a heavy field. And I'm still very passionate about that work. Obviously, I feel like if you get into that work, like there's a reason, but I didn't see me being able to stick it out for the long haul. And like some of my colleagues are able to do, which is in fact incredible. But I just knew that there was like something more that I would be able to still work on helping people have healthy relationships, but in a different capacity.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the Enneagram, how did you find out about it? Because I think like I know a lot of my listeners are going to be like, oh yeah, I like definitely know about it, but I'm sure that there's going to be a few that are listening that are like, what the hell's an Enneagram?
Yeah. And it did, when I always share this, when I first started to talk about it like with my close family members, they were literally looking at me like I had a third eye on my forehead. They're like, what are you talking about? But being that like my background is in psychology, I discovered it like in the field when I was in my master's program and really just looking for another tool. We have always been taught about Myers-Briggs or strength finders or like other personality tests. but they are so focused on your behaviors. So maybe you do things a certain way, but the Enneagram is different in that it's about your motivation. So the why, the how, and the motivations behind why you do what you do. And so essentially, we could all be doing the same behavior, but the reason why we're doing that behavior is different based on our type. And that's really what kind of captivated me. I mean, it's kind of dramatic, but that's really what drew me to the Enneagram is like, okay, this isn't just something that like you learn and then you move on, right? Like you're able to use this as a tool to better understand yourself, other people, to grow, to become like better versions of ourselves. So many different ways that you can use the Enneagram.
Yeah, for sure. Like I know a lot of people now are using it in business, and obviously like relationship it's huge. Like it's so funny. I always like refer to my husband as like the Enneagram 1 of Enneagram ones. And like
Yeah.
I'm a 3, and it's just so funny because I'm like, "Oh no, my husband's an Enneagram 1. We will be following the rules here, folks." Like yeah,
Yeah.
like he is a, follow it to a T, all of the things, but obviously I'm not extremely educated in it. However, I do realize like from the beginning that it's definitely like how are you motively based and like what is your fears and your insecurities, and can you talk a little bit about that, like how that actually corresponds to like different, obviously there's 9 enneagrams, but like can you talk about like how that actually kind of tangibly makes sense on how people are actually based instead of personality?
Yeah, so there are 9 different types. So the Enneagram splits people up into 9 different types. And those 9 types, I like to refer to them as like lenses for understanding or lenses that we view the world. So let's say that every Enneagram 2, I'm a 2, so I'll say 2, is wearing blue colored glasses, and every Enneagram 3, like yourself, is wearing green colored glasses. So like everything that I look at is going to have that blue tint to it. When you look at it, it's going to have that green tint to it. So you and I could be looking at the same situation, the same project, the same conflict, whatever that looks like, and viewing it differently just based on the lens of our Enneagram type. And then our lens is made up of our motivations, which is our biggest fears. So what we fear the most, and our biggest desires. So what we want the most in our lives. So we fear things and that dictates our behaviors, and we want things. So for the Enneagram 1, they're called the reformer. Their biggest fear is being seen as a bad person, being wrong, doing the wrong thing. And then their biggest desire is to be seen as a good person, to do the right thing, to be considered ethical and moral. So going back to your husband, for example, ones typically are known as being rule followers because they feel like that's the right thing to do to be seen as a good person. So you can kind of see how those things connect. The 2 is the helper. So their biggest desire is to be loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, and their biggest fear is being unloved, unwanted, not appreciated, not needed, things like that. The 3 is the achiever. So their biggest desire is to be successful, but they also want to be seen as competent, capable, and respected for that success. And then their biggest fear is failure. So they fear failure the most, but then being seen as incompetent or incapable of doing something. The 4 is the individualist. So their biggest desire is to be seen as unique or special or significant. And then their biggest fear is that something is like inherently wrong with them, that they're defective, they have something wrong with them, they're not significant, things like that, or emotionally cut off. The 5 is the investigator. They're the most introverted of all of the types, but remember, introverted and extroversion is technically a behavior. So even though they are the most introverted, like other people can be introverted, and there also are extroverted 5s as well, because it comes down to the motivations. But their biggest desire is to gain knowledge, to be knowledgeable, to be seen as like competent because of the things that they know, versus the 3s, they want to be seen as competent for the things that they do. So that's the biggest difference there. And then 5s, their biggest fear is having their personal space or resources invaded on. So like their time, their energy being depleted. The sixes, their biggest desire is safety and security and being able to seek guidance from those around them. And then their biggest fear is typically fear itself or being without any support, guidance, security, etc. The seven is going to be your most extroverted type. So like fives are the most introverted, sevens are the most extroverted. So sevens, their biggest desire is to have fun, but ultimately they're seeking contentment in everything that they're doing. So sometimes for sevens, you see the behaviors as like wanting to experience new things or like wanting to avoid boredom. And that's because they're looking for contentment. And then for their biggest fear, they do have a lot of FOMO. So they do have that fear of missing out, but ultimately they're trying to avoid feeling trapped in any sort of emotional pain or negativity. The eight, they're the challenger. So they are motivated by this desire to protect themselves and other people. This can look like their people or vulnerable populations or anybody they feel like needs to be protected. And then their biggest fear is being seen as weak or powerless or controlled in some way. So eights tend to have like a pretty strong exterior. You can tend to feel their energy. And then nines, they're the peacemaker. So their biggest desire is to maintain a peaceful environment for themselves and for the people around them. And then their biggest fear tends to be conflict. But that's not saying that other types also don't fear conflict. It's just for nines, it makes up their biggest motivation. So they fear conflict, and then they also fear being separated from the people that they love or abandoned in that sort of way.
Awesome. So when someone goes and takes their Enneagram test, which there's, obviously a few Enneagram tests online, like I have always kind of referred to the Truly one or whatever. Is there a
Yeah,
better,
truly.
is that Truity? Yeah. Is that like one of the best ones to kind of use, or is there a better one?
So I recommend tests that are going to give you like your probability.
Okay.
So tests like Truity or like the Ready, where and Ready is spelled RHETI. It stands for Riso and Hudson Enneagram Typing Instrument. Those are going to give you like the likelihood that you are a type versus there are some tests that like spit out like you are a two or you are a seven. And I don't think that those are as accurate. The reason being is that we're human. And so we answer questions in ways we want other people to perceive us. Even if we swear up and down, we're not doing it like we are. And so it's really hard also for these tests to get to motivations because there aren't clarifying questions, right? So a lot of us who work in the field will help people figure out their type by starting with sending a test, but then having an almost like an interview where we are asking those clarifying questions to get to the motivations versus just the behaviors themselves.
Do you still offer those, or is that something that
Yeah.
yeah, you do? Oh, fabulous. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So you do one-on-one sessions. Amazing. Um, the wings. A lot of people are very curious about the Enneagram wing. So is that, I've heard, and tell me if obviously this is true or not, but it's like how you become more whole or how to become like a better version of yourself is when you use the wings. Is that true? Or am I explaining
So
it
the
correct?
wings lead to you becoming like a more well-rounded version of your type. So you pull characteristics from the wings, and the wings do have to be on either side of your main type. A common misconception is that it's your second highest score, but that's not possible unless it's next to your type. So like as a two, my wings would be a one and a three. Most people will say that they do have a stronger wing. Like I definitely feel like my three wing is stronger, but that doesn't mean that my one wing doesn't exist. It just needs to be developed more. So that's part of like becoming a more well-rounded version of your type. Whereas your main type cannot change, so it's been with you from birth. Your wings can fluctuate. So like right now in the season of my life, I have my own business. I'm pretty driven and motivated. Like it's no wonder that my three wing stands out, but maybe, in a few years, my one wing might feel stronger. So those can fluctuate.
Awesome. And so I know obviously you use the Enneagram, obviously coming from your background in relationships and, psychology, you use it a lot for relationships. Like, how can someone use it for, well, we'll talk about multiple things, but how can someone use it to really like either get along with their partner more, understand their partner more? My husband and I have been married we've been together over 20 years. And like, I do feel like the more that I can kind of get to know him, and obviously knowing what he's motivated by, I think has been unbelievably helpful, not only in our relationship, but just in his business and all of the things. So like, how do you use it with your clients in relationships?
Well, once we start to understand why people do things the way that they do, we can start to offer more compassion or a deeper level of understanding for those things that we might not like, right? So, like there are times when, so my husband is an Enneagram 6, and there are times where I don't understand that level of needing to be prepared or like prepping for things. But I know that he needs that because of his biggest fear and being fear, and his biggest desire being wanting that safety and security. So if we understand that about each other, we can start to understand how each other communicate based on their type, how we deal with conflict and work through conflict, how we just like work through daily situations, right? Based on that lens, like I talked about, that we're viewing the world through.
Do you still do therapy like with couples in that capacity, or do you just now do the Enneagram, or like, is that something you still
So
do?
I'm not a licensed therapist, but I do coaching with couples or families or whatever that looks like for those who want to understand each other better through the framework of the Enneagram.
Oh, fabulous. Do you do more couples, or do you do more businesses?
More businesses for sure.
Businesses for sure. So how, and this is the part that I'm like so curious about. So like, how do you actually come into a corporation or a business? I have a lot of clients who own, businesses, corporations, multiple locations and all the things, and a lot of people who listen to this podcast. What would be like the first few things that you would encourage? Or, my husband, his company's got hundreds of employees. Like, do they do lunch and learns and stuff like that? Obviously you'd come in, but like, what does that actually tangibly look like for a company on improving, obviously, their customer or their client, or pardon me, their employees, their customers, their clients, all of the things? How does the Enneagram actually like tangibly help inside of corporate setting?
Well, the reason why I'm so obsessed with it is because of like the tangible results that we've seen, where it decreases turnover, it increases productivity, because once people have better workplace morale, they're able to get more things done, they're able to thrive in their businesses. And I've always been kind of obsessed with results as a whole. Like when I was working in the field I was before, like I was working in preventing sexual violence from happening and dealing with those tangible results. So it's kind of just transitioned into a different area of my work, but being able to see those things and see those, it's easy for me to say like, well, relationships are strengthened and things like that. But what we're seeing is that people are communicating more, which leads to an increase in communication, in less turnover, and also a decrease in conflict because they're just able to understand why people do things the way that they're doing them. So some people will work with me where I work with the team one-on-one to help them figure out their type, and then I work with the group as a whole to understand, okay, now we know that your team contains all of these types. I literally just got off of doing this like right before I met with you. Um, and what does that mean for your team? Like, how are you going to communicate as a team? What are going to be some of your struggles as a team? And how do we, work through that? A lot of people also have me come in and work through leadership. So, how do you lead based on your type? And how are you led based on your type? Because those two things can be very different. So it's just fascinating to see. And it's very heartening for me to see businesses who are willing to invest in the well-being of their teams and their employees in this sort of way.
Oh my gosh, there's no doubt about it. Like, absolutely, hands down, no question about it. I mean, out of all of the, clients that I've worked with over the years in the business capacity, for sure, you know, employees are the hardest part.
Yeah.
A strong culture is the hardest part, you know, like that's just hands down, that's just the hardest part. So learning how to communicate with your team and learning how to actually like, because I feel like we as human beings, like sometimes I'm sure we've all done this where you like bang your head against the wall and be like, why in the hell does this
Yeah.
person not fucking get what I'm trying to tell them?
Yeah.
You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, how do you not get this? But like you said, if I am viewing it with a green lens and someone
Right.
with a blue lens or a blue, you know, muffler over their ears is listening to it, it is coming out like English and French. It is just two different
Totally.
languages.
Yep, that's exactly the point. And so like when I work with these teams, part of it is part of it is learning that that's a thing. Like I think a lot of us we know logically that we're different humans and that there's more than one way to like get something done and there's more than one way to do something. We know that, but I think seeing it firsthand is just totally different where they're like, "Oh, that's what you mean by all of us being different."
Yeah, so you come in and you'll talk with the leadership team. And then so once people know, so like let's just like I really like to get into like tangibles for people so they can actually take things away. And obviously, like if you own a business or if you want to know, you know, your own Enneagram or you're in a relationship and you want to have more experience hands-on, to obviously reach out to Ashton. We'll give us all the information in the show notes and all the things. Go find her. She's extremely famous on all the platforms. Is Instagram your biggest platform?
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
for
I
sure.
don't I don't dedicate enough time to TikTok as I should.
You know what? It's so funny. Do you know who Camille Moore is?
Yeah.
Oh my God, love her. She was just on my podcast just a little while ago. She's huge on TikTok and I had no
Yeah.
idea. My assistant is the reason why I found her like on
Oh, yeah.
Instagram. Like she's average on Instagram, but like on TikTok, apparently
I
like
know.
she's brilliant. Oh my gosh, she's so good. But she devotes a lot of her time to TikTok.
I feel like it's you either have a huge following on Instagram and you struggle with TikTok, or like you have a huge following on TikTok and like Instagram's average. I feel like,
It's so
well, it's
funny.
really hard to like devote all of your time to two separate platforms.
Oh my God, 100%. Like that's 101, you guys. I want you to hear that straight from Ashton. Pick one and get really
Yeah.
freaking good at it.
Yeah.
Like pick
You don't
one.
need to do it all.
No, you really don't. You have to know like who you're actually talking to and like what your business model actually is. And I
Right.
think like I'd love to kind of like touch on that too of how you
Yeah.
actually started this because this is like the whole purpose of the podcast is be like,
Yeah.
how did you decide to leave psychology and go head first into this? Like, what was your mindset behind that? Because I'm sure there's people in your life who are like, what do you mean you're not doing this
100%.
anymore?
Yeah. I still am not sure that my dad knows how to tell people what I do for
Oh my God, isn't
for
that
work.
so funny?
Yeah. I'm like, what does he say to like his golfing buddies about what I do for work?
Oh my God, so funny. So I used to play pro golf and my dad was
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that's how I like I came from the pro golf world and like corporate stuff and all of that. And then I did this. And like my dad's in the golfing world. And like it wasn't until maybe like, I don't know, 4 years ago that like I showed my dad like how much money I was making.
Yeah.
And he was just like, Chris, I've
Wait,
read
what?
yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, I've read about people like you. Like they've done things on the internet. And I was like, oh my God, I'm dying. Like, do you
Yeah.
remember the what is it called? The Third Door. He had like just read that book or something. And he's like,
Yeah.
Chris, you're like the person in that book.
Dads are so funny.
That is so funny. Like, no clue. They're like, they're so happy for you. They're just like, you know, you're doing your thing, but like zero clue that it's like quote unquote a real job. So, like, when you were transitioning in 2019, I know we're kind of all over the place, but I think this is so helpful for people because, like, in my job, I've just realized that, like, so many people believe it's everyone else can do it. Like, there is no magic secret that I have, that you have, that anyone else has. I truly just believe it's a decision and you just keep taking action when it's like super hard or when everyone tells you it's not going to work or that you're crazy. Like, so when you left like your clinical setting and went all in in 2019 and grew from like 0 to 200,000 that year, like what was your mindset and like what were you thinking?
I don't know what I was thinking, to be honest. I was like, what am I doing? But I think that has that's part of it, right? Is like that I think a lot of people are afraid to like take that first step because they feel like they can't see past that first step. And sometimes you just have to take the step in order to be able to see clearly where you should go next. And I think that most people who, take that leap and they're, jumping into a business that they don't know a lot about is like, that's just the point, is they don't know. And you just have to learn along the way. There's like a quote, it's kind of cheesy, but I'm a two, so I'm allowed to be cheesy. About like how you take the leap and you build the wings on the way down or something. And that's like exactly what it was for me. It was like, well, I know that um this is what I want to do, and I want to build it, and so I'm just going to figure it out. And that's how it's going to be. I do think that I had to silence a lot of the opinions of people around me, which again is very, very difficult as an Enneagram 2, who like wants to be loved and wanted, and all like wants everybody to be happy with them at all times. Um, but it was important for me to like be able to make the decision on my own. Now, my Enneagram 6 husband, who was just, were we engaged? I think we were engaged, but we weren't married yet. Um, he is very risk averse. And so that was also something for me to know about him being a 6, that it was a very scary what's going to happen. But I just had total like faith that I would figure it out. And if I didn't, I'll just do something else.
That, oh, I love that so much. How did you, because that's something that over the years, I promise you, I have had more people come to me, more women in particular. Like I work with men and women, but like a lot of women in particular that go to their husband in this sense of like, perhaps maybe I'm thinking about perhaps doing this. Like, what do you think? What if it doesn't work and all the things, as opposed to going to their husband with like, hey, I love you and respect the heck out of you, but I'm gonna do this. And I just really, really feel, you know, sure that like no matter what, I'm gonna figure this out and I'd love your support. I feel like that is the energetic difference there, and the commitment and the decision to it is so different. How did you like, because I'd love to know from like the Enneagram standpoint, how did you approach your husband in a way in which it made him feel kind of safe, but like also like, hey babe, I love you, but I'm gonna do this?
So I had, I mean, a slight plan, right? And I kind of said, like, I can always go back. Like I had an amazing boss who really encouraged me to do this. And she was like, if it doesn't work, like, call me up, we'll chat. And so I think, that was helpful too, to like have some sort of a plan. But it definitely was me being confident, like I had to be confident in my ability, and to be like, hey, I'm going to do this. It's going to work. I know it's going to work. This is why it's going to work. And if it doesn't, I'll figure it out.
Have you always had that mindset? Because like, you can call me like I brand as a confidence coach or whatever it is, but like at the end of the day, I believe confidence comes by taking action. It's like a muscle. The more that you use it, the stronger it becomes. So did you have that growth mindset? Did you have that belief in yourself when you started, or has that like grown with taking the actions to see that like there is a path?
So, a big piece of my story that I didn't share is that I started my own business straight out of college when I was 22, and it was a women's boutique. And I decided to forego grad school. I was going to go to grad school right after college for psychology. And I instead decided to move back home to my small town and open a store, a brick and mortar store. It was absolutely crazy. I don't know why I did it. It was a lot of fun. I had it for 5 years and it was a blast. But it was, I think, part of that helped kind of cultivate my ability to take risk in the future and to take action. And I've had a business before and I learned a lot. Obviously, a completely different type of business versus like a boutique that was brick and mortar versus an online business, very different. But I had kind of the foundation of what I needed to do and had taken risk before. And here's the thing, I took the risk and like it didn't really work out. Like I had it open for 5 years, but it wasn't making me a lot of money. I wanted to go back to school. It wasn't fulfilling me anymore. And so I would never consider it a failure, but I would say that I um ended it a lot sooner than I thought I was going to, but it really set me up for being able to do things in the future.
Yeah. I have faith is a big part of my life. Like it's a big part of, everything for me. And to me, I just like look at that as like at the time, you had no idea how important it was going to be to this season of your life. But if you wouldn't have had that store and made those decisions and, grew that confidence in those regards, it would have been so much, more difficult to make the decision, in 2019 to kind of go on board. You said you had a plan. What was kind of quote unquote the plan in 2019 when you first started putting yourself out there? Like, what did you think that kind of looked like? Because I feel like we all, when we start our businesses, feel like it's going to look like this, but like we thought it was going to look like versus what it does look like is oftentimes very different. So like when you first started putting yourself out there and decided to leave your professional career, what did that kind of look like, or what did you think it was going to look like?
So I just was like, I'm gonna have clients, like I'm gonna do coaching, and I was before I left my full-time job, I would work full-time. I had an hour commute. So I would drive the hour there in the morning, work till 5, drive the hour back, and then from like 6 to 10 p.m. I would take clients. And I was pretty busy doing that. And so that was really my plan, is like, oh, well, if I stop that full-time job, then I can take clients during the day and I'll just take clients all the time. Kind of like the being naive about the time commitment and kind of maxing yourself out with just like one-on-one client work. So I said I still do it, but I do more of like the groups, the businesses, the organizations, and things like that. So I thought like, wow, this is just a dream. I can build my schedule. I'll work with clients. Like it was a very small minded plan. It wasn't a big picture. This is where I could go. It was like, this is what I can do to like survive and to make up for my um, full-time income, is I can do this to survive. I had no idea that I could do this to grow.
Awesome. So how did that mindset shift? Like what actually started to happen? So your calendar got full, your
Mhm.
schedule got full with like one-on-one clients. That's what you were doing. And then what kind of happened after that? Or like, where did you kind of see it go? Like, obviously you've written numerous books, you have your journal, like there's a lot of things now that you're doing. You do a ton of speaking engagements. Like, how did you kind of figure out what you wanted that to look like? Did you have a coach? Did you have someone kind of helping you along the way? Were you looking at other people? Like, what did that kind of look like, and what do you see kind of moving forward?
So it started by like sororities actually booking me to come speak to their groups. And obviously it was like significantly more money than just these one-on-one clients. And I started to be like, wow, I can make this in an hour versus like the one-on-one stuff in an hour. And I've been very lucky to have a lot of word of mouth and really like a lot of podcasts that have spread the word about me doing these groups. So I did hire a business coach in 21 who really, and I still have her today, who really like helped me move forward. And I'm not a great big picture thinker. Like I know that about myself. It's a very typical 2 quality as well. So I'm not a big picture thinker. I'm really a present moment thinker.
Which is
And
so lovely in so many
yeah,
regards for those big picture people who are always thinking about the next thing. I work with like a lot of very successful, high achieving people, and it's like never in the moment. It's always like 3 or 4 steps
yeah,
ahead. So it's actually a beautiful thing.
right. If I could just have like a sprinkling of both, that would be great.
Correct.
And so that really helped me think about, okay, well, where do I want to take this business and what do I want it to do? In 2021, I think it was 21, I was on Glennon Doyle's podcast.
Oh.
And that really gained a lot of traction for my speaking. And so from there, I started to book bigger, higher paying clients and made that primarily what my business is. I also have had 2 kids since I started this business. And so that has also changed priorities for me, right? Where like, I don't want to be behind my computer screen talking to clients all day long. Like, I want to be able to pick and choose when I am doing one-on-one clients and then, doing some of those higher ticket speaking events, which has been really great for our family.
Oh, that's awesome. Quick question that I think that it's helpful because I think a lot of people will probably hear you, and whether this is someone's first time hearing about the Enneagram or they feel like they're really well versed in it, there's a million people, and I think that being able to set yourself apart and how you set yourself apart is really important. And I think, I feel like I set myself apart in certain ways. And like, how did you set yourself apart? Like, how did you become one of the top people really in the Enneagram space? What do you think you did really well? Because I think that people really need to like hear this.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I got a question actually in my question box a couple weeks ago that said, like, do you think that the Enneagram coaching community is oversaturated? And I'm sure you get that question. Like, people think they see all these people and that there's like no room, right? And that's not true. Like, there are so many people, and people hire you because of who you are. People hire me because of who I am. And, I might not be for everybody, and that's okay. I will refer them to somebody who does things the way that they're looking for. So I think that showing your personality is really a huge way to set yourself apart. When I first created my account, it was a faceless account. And so I didn't really show my face until the
No
first,
way. That's so interesting. I didn't realize that.
it was the first 6 months of um my account where I didn't really show myself. It wasn't Enneagram Ashton. It was just like a regular
Is there a reason
name.
for that you wouldn't mind sharing?
I was like nervous to put myself out there.
Thank you. I
Um,
wanted you to say that because like I think
yeah,
that's like the really important part that like
yeah,
so many people fucking struggle with. And like
yeah, I was
when I
nervous.
quit pro golf, my social media handle forever was Golf Christina. When I
Yeah,
got rid of Golf Christina, I feel like I lost my whole identity. It was like such a big thing. Even still to this day, I go do speaking
yeah,
engagements. And like half the people want to fucking talk about golf. I'm like, sure, we'll
yeah.
talk about it.
Sure,
But
we'll talk.
yeah, we'll talk about it, whatever. But all of that to be said, thank you for sharing that because I think it's
Yeah.
so helpful for people to realize like Ashton has over, if you go follow her right now, she has over 500,000 followers on Instagram. And like the first 6 months, she didn't show her face. So thank you for saying that.
And like, I mean, I'm still get nervous. Like I talked to my part of this is like things that I struggle with specifically, as well as Enneagram twos of that like need to feel liked. Like, what do I share? What do I not share? Right. I was talking to my business coach yesterday. I was like, give me a pep talk. I need a pep talk about like sharing something. So I don't think that, I think it gets better. Like those first 6 months, I was like, I don't want anybody to know who I am. Like, I'm so nervous. And even still today, when we were just at a wedding over the weekend, and somebody that was there was talking to somebody else about like who I am and what I do. And I still feel a little uncomfortable sometimes when people are like throwing me accolades, like, and I think it's just something that like you have to work through if you're gonna have a business. But I didn't show my face until 6 months into having it. And it was because I have a really great group of girlfriends who were with me, and they're like, Ashton, you need to start showing your face. Like, you are, this is like weird for me to even say. They're like, you are funny, and like you have the personality for this. Like, you need to start showing these people who you are. And it was that weekend. It was my friend's like 30th birthday. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I changed my handle to Enneagram Ashton. I like started like totally rebranded it to be like me talking about the Enneagram. And I think that's a huge reason why I grew so quickly.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I do feel like all of a sudden, I don't know about you, but like I kind of exist in the self-development type of space
Yeah.
to where sometimes it's like so cringe that it just makes you want to like vomit because like everyone's
Yeah.
like it's just so like I'm like, oh my God, like $1 million in a day and like all of this cringy crap that like I'm just like, oh, this is not even real. But like part of me feels like when you like now everyone's like be vulnerable, show yourself. I'm like, bitch, I've been doing this for 7 years. Like this has always been the actual way to be successful. You have to be willing to be yourself because someone is going to fall in love with you. Like the introduction to my podcast is like, yes, that you heard that right. I say God and shit in the same sentence. Like
Yeah.
that's who I am. Like I am, this is just exactly who I am. And there's going to be people who love it and people who cannot stand you, but that's
Right.
okay. Like that's, that actually, if we think about it, like, as I don't ever want to be super polarizing, but like those are the people that actually get the attention. People who are just like being so much of themselves that sometimes it's a little dramatic, but like showing who you are is actually made you so much more likable. So is there any strategies or anything that you had to really grow your account? Anything that you think that you would like to share that like did really well for you?
Consistency and collaboration. Those are like the two big things that I always talk about, where I showed up consistently. And even on the days I didn't want to show up, even when I didn't look like I wanted to look consistently, and I collaborated with a lot of other accounts that were like-minded to me, and we kind of like, bounced ideas off of other people or created content in support of one another. And I just am a big believer in that we can do things community in a community minded sort of way, and that we can work together versus working to separate.
Awesome. I love that. That's so good. So last kind of, thing to kind of talk about is if people want to, obviously, number one, you guys get your phone. If you're listening to it on your phone, pull up Instagram, Enneagram Ashton. I share it with so many people. Like literally, I don't know how I originally found you, but like when I know a client is like a 2 or 3 or whatever, I was like, here, let me share with you like Ashton's highlight. Just go follow her stuff because your highlights are so brilliant. I also think that that's a very smart business move, is the fact that like you have a ton of content that can be extremely valuable. Like this is like business 101, guys. She has a ton of content that's extremely valuable, whether you pay her $1 or you don't. I mean, it is just very accessible, very clean, very like your highlights have, I guarantee you, I've sent 100 people your highlights over the last 2 years and you don't even know me. So it's like, I think that that is just really speaks volumes about what you've been able to do and like how you've shown up. But then also too, you guys, she has her books, she has her journals, she has her one-on-ones. But definitely, if you are someone who is listening to this that not only has a company or you're in a relationship, definitely be sure to go follow her because the information is fabulous. But then also reach out to you about your programs. And you did say upcoming, you have tell us about the upcoming what is it, a course or a class or a master class?
Yeah, so I have a community that's just for Enneagram 2. So it's called the Support Squad. And so we have monthly education, group coaching, guest speakers, a book club, and it's specifically for Enneagram 2s. But I have ongoing education. I do have a course called From Curious to Confident, which helps you to dive deep into all 9 types. I have, services to help people dive deeper into their type and figure out their type. And then, of course, my speaking and my business consulting is the most common that I do.
Fabulous. Well, if I can ever help in the support group, please do let me know. I'm so grateful that you took your time today. I know that you're highly sought after, you guys. I've been looking forward to this podcast for the last few months. I appreciate you taking the time to be on. You guys, like I said, please, she shares her time, so please go share hers. Be sure to follow her. Like I said, share her content with people who want to know about the Enneagram. Perhaps it'll help your business. Perhaps it'll help your team grow your confidence. And if you want to know more about Enneagram, I mean, you've got your, what is it called? The Enneagram Made Simple. It's like super cheap, like under $100.
Yeah. Enneagram Made Simple. I wrote a little bit of Enneagram, the Enneagram for Relationships, and then a couples journal as well.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for being here, girl. I really appreciate it.
For
You guys,
having
please
me.
go follow her, share this podcast with someone who needs it. And do not forget, at any moment in time, you have the power to decide, just like Ashton.